World. It's 39.6, episode number 93. Should I front load or dollar cost average? Today is Tuesday, October 6, 2020. This is a 39.6 Facebook Live and YouTube Live finance show. The show that teaches high earners like yourselves how to make your money work for you so you don't have to work for your money. We talk general investing, taxes, retirement accounts, real estate, syndications, Airbnb, paying for childcare, paying for college, and even the car you drive. Today we are taking a listener question from the Facebook group, 39.6 community. If you're not in it, please join us. This question comes from Arvin. Arvin asks, what are your thoughts on front-loading IRAs, whether Roth or traditional, 529, and taxable accounts at the start of the year? I have set mine up on a bi-weekly basis to cost average it, but I hear conflicting views on this versus front-loading the accounts. Okay. So it's interesting, he had only asked about IRAs, 529, and taxable accounts. Those are accounts that are not at all related to your employer. Okay. Sorry, for the people who are out there, and if you can actually see my tax graph, please let me know, because I have had issues with my screen share on the split screen. All right. So first of all, if you have an employer-sponsored account, I'm just going to kind of knock this out of the way in case this applies to you. If you have an account that has a match, like a 401k or a 403b, often they will only put the match in the months where you're putting money in. And so if you put in $19,500 in the first month and they give you like a 4% match on that, you would get your 4% match on that $19,500. So that'd be like $800 or so. But then in the subsequent months, you might not get any match. Now, you can ask them to do a true up where they will then correct it later on, like at the end of the year, and make sure you get the full amount of match that they potentially would give you. Okay, so you just have to be careful on how that money comes in from the employer, because if they're planning to give you more money, but you front loaded it all on the first paycheck, you might not get that unless you ask for it, and then they might have to fix it. And often it's just easier not to have to deal with talking to HR or whomever to make something fixed. So you might want to dollar cost average that just for logistical purposes. For example, my wife has a mandatory 403b. She doesn't even have a choice how much goes in on that account. 6.65% of her income per paycheck goes in, and then 8.5% from the employer goes in every single paycheck until income hits whatever the year's the cap is for that year. Currently, it's $285,000. Okay, and then it would stop. That's a federal regulation. Okay, so apart from that situation where spreading out your contributions can help make sure you get your full employer contribution, then we have the situation like the question, which is in those accounts like an IRA or a taxable account where that's up to you, not related to your job. Should you dollar cost average, spread it out evenly through the year, or put it all up front? Now, statistically speaking, over historic data, front-loading contributions comes out ahead approximately 2 times out of 3. Okay, so statistically, it tends to be a better approach. However, a lot of people may have regret if they front load it all and then it crashes. So like we front loaded most all of our retirement accounts in January and February, everything except for that one that has to go in monthly. And then March happened, and then we saw all those contributions go down by like 30%. So was there a little bit of regret? Certainly, if that was the only money we had invested, it would probably hurt more if we were new to investing. I wish we had gotten more money in March, April, May when it was lower, and it would have gone up by now. But, you know, these are all just things that they're just noise. dollar cost averaging over every month or every 2 weeks, if you compare that to lump summing, front loading at the front of the year, lump summing at the front of the year is really just dollar cost averaging over a bigger time scale. It's just every year, like every January instead of every 2 weeks. So it's still dollar cost average. However, to be technical, whenever you're bolusing up and putting all that capital up front that you have available all at once, that is a lump sum contribution. To dollar cost average really is like you have a bunch of money and then you choose to spread it out. Okay. If dollar cost averaging really made sense, then people argue, well, then at the end of the year, would you sell all of your investments and then reinvest it every month going forward? Like, let's pretend at the end of the year, you have $1 million invested. And then on January 1st, would you sell it all and then invest $80,000 a year? I say $80,000 a month up until the end of the year, plus your new contribution? That does not make any sense, right? So lump sum contributions historically have done better than dollar cost averaging. That's assuming you have the money available. Now, an IRA is only $6,000 per person per year. So it's $12,000 in total. Now, for some people, that's a lot of money to invest all at once. For other people, that $6,000 is the smallest amount they're going to invest at any given time during the year. So some people invest $10,000 a month. So $6,000 is less than 1 month of a contribution. So you might as well just do it all up front in one bite. Okay? That's how I think of it. I mean, we have all of these accounts. We have 12 accounts. If there are things that I can just hammer out at the beginning and just get them out of the way, I try to do that. Now, front loading a taxable account doesn't really make sense to me, because if you're really investing throughout the entire year, if you've already filled up all of your accounts, then there's nowhere else to put it besides your taxable account. So I just consider putting your taxable account into every single month, whatever money is available that month to invest. Okay, so let's pretend you're putting $12,000 into 2 IRAs. You could, let's say, do that in January. And then in February, you could do your 529. That might be however much, was that $14,000, $15,000 a month or per year, whatever is the gift tax limit for that year, or whatever your state tax deduction is for that year. If there's a limit based on a 529, you could do that, let's say, in February. This is assuming you have enough money to do this. And then in March, you could, let's say, max out your work retirement accounts. Okay. And then April, continue doing that until your employer accounts are filled up, then switch to taxable for the remaining part of the year. So that's kind of in general how I think about this. But now, if you have a taxable account that has a bunch of money in it, at the beginning of the year in January 1, you could just front load those IRAs from the taxable account. You don't need to use new money. So I really think about this as all of your investments start at the taxable account, and then you just write a check or transfer from there everything. Okay. Now, your employer accounts, it doesn't work that way. It has to come from your paycheck. But every account that doesn't have to come from your paycheck can just come onto your taxable brokerage. So in January 1, you can just fill up all of those buckets that are non-employer based. And then from your paycheck, fill up your employer-based 401k or 403b or 457. Then, once you're done with that in the year, just refill taxable. Okay, and this makes it a lot easier logistically. You don't have to keep track of everything. I like to have like one transaction for each contribution for the whole year, maybe 2 if needed, just because bookkeeping-wise, it's so much easier. If you just look, boom, I filled up $19,500 on that one paycheck. Done. And then you can just see that it was done and taken off of that one paycheck. You don't have to keep track of like 15 or 24 payments over the course of the year to make sure you hit that number. Okay. Now I'm going to bring up a separate topic, which I think is actually even more important. It's not whether to dollar cost average or to front load, but it's whether to front load or to back load. Okay. And this is something that I very rarely hear people talk about, but this is far more important of a question, okay? One of the questions I answered a handful of episodes ago, maybe like 50 episodes ago now, was how do I tax plan? Okay, so I mean, I have an idea each year what I'm going to make, but it's just an idea. And the farther into the year you go, the more likely you have a better idea of where you're going to end up. Okay, so like in January 1st, I could project my income could be anywhere from here to here. And then as the year goes farther, it's going to center in on one of those numbers. Okay, so I'm going to bring up my tax graph here. And this is critical. So if you see on the tax graph, once you're over $650,000 of adjusted gross income, you're at the 37% bracket if you're married filing jointly. If you are single or head of household, that happens earlier. It happens around $540,000 or so. Okay. If you're already in the top tax bracket, then in general, if you have a choice between pre-tax and post-tax, the answer is pre-tax. Okay. Now, I have these shades of red and pink and pale pink. They go all the way down until the bottom of the 32% bracket. So it's basically divided into three flavors: blue, yellow, and red. And the red flavor is anything in the 30s, yellow is in the 20s, and blue is anything in the 0 to 12%. In the 0 to 12% range, and these colors are applying to married filing jointly, but if you're using single or head of household, ignore the colors, just look at the steps. If your adjusted gross income is going to fall in the blue zone, then I would not get that excited about doing pre-tax investing because you're only saving it at up to 12%. Now, if you're in the yellow zone, that's kind of the wash area where you could go one way or the other. And that would depend on a lot of other things, like what your state tax rate is, how likely you're going to be in the red areas in subsequent years. If you're never going to get into the red zone, then yellow is your red zone, and you want to go pre-tax and get down to the blue zone. But if you're going to be living up here in the red space, then you very much in the yellow may want to consider doing Roth contributions. Okay? Again, it depends like what state tax rate you're paying currently or what state tax rate you could be paying later and how the pre-tax withdrawals are taxed depending on the state that you're in when you're retired. Okay, and these are all subject to change. Okay, but in the red zone, especially the high red zone, I very much recommend anybody doing pre-tax. And if you're a high income person and you have a year when you're in the blue zone, I would do Roths. So this is where backloading comes in. Let's pretend you make around $400,000 per year. Okay, so your $400,000 is this line over here. Okay, and you're married. Okay, so you're in the red space, but you're only in the red space for $50,000. So you want to be careful how much pre-tax you put in. If you have a 401k at work and your spouse, like mine, has a 403b and a 457b at work, you put all of those things together, that's 6 figures of contributions, okay? Because of the employer side of the contributions. And I consider that employer contribution as part of my income. So $57,000 from a 403b, $57,000 from a 401k is $114,000. And then there's another 403b another 457b she has access to, $19,500. So you add like $20,000 on top of $114, you're at $134,000. If we were at $500,000 of total gross income, if we were at $400,000 of total gross income, okay, and then we did pre-tax for all of that money, okay, and we're talking about like $134,000, that would take me from over here all the way down, from 400 all the way down to 260, which is down over here, well into the yellow zone. So you may want to consider just doing pre-tax down until you hit that line to get to 350, then switching to Roth. Alternatively, if let's say you're a $200,000 income family and you're doing pre-tax and you're going to get down to the blue zone if you go all pre-tax, you may want to consider switching to Roth. The problem with front loading, once you put money into that pre-tax bucket, like a pre-tax 401k, you can't change your mind in the middle of the year unless they allow you to do in-service Roth conversions. And a lot of employers will not allow you to do that. If they do, then it's no problem. But if they don't, you have to make the right decision. So if you have a choice in your 401k or 403b, you may want to wait until closer to the end of the year and then backload in the appropriate bucket that you want. So there are some that you do not have a choice for, however. My wife's 457B is only a pre-tax option. My wife's 403B mandatory is only a pre-tax option. She can only do Roth contributions in her secondary 403B, the optional one, and I can do 403B Roth contributions on my employee contributions and my 401k at work. Okay, so there's basically $19,500 from my 401k and up to $19,500 in her 403B where we have a choice between pre-tax or Roth. So we may want to wait until right around now in October and look at where we are. And if we're only, let's say here at 250, and we're like, oh, we're not even going to make it into the pink space, we may just do all Roth contributions for that $38,000, $39,000. Okay, so that's how I do a lot of my tax planning. Now, there are other things that come into play, especially if you have private businesses, real estate and other businesses that have taxable potential losses. And you might not know what those are going to be until after the year is over. This is actually one of the problems because business filings aren't due until March of the subsequent year. But your 401k, 403b employee contributions have to go in by December 31st. Not the employer side, but the employee side. So you have to sometimes make that decision without all the right information. So if you're a full-time real estate professional and you don't know if you're going to be able to close on a deal by the end of the year, which is going to give you a bunch of bonus depreciation to decrease your taxable income, you just don't know where you're going to end up. But let's pretend you do buy that asset and you're able to wipe away $100,000 of taxable income. Well, that $100,000 tax loss could pull you into blue territory. And so you might not want to be doing pre-tax if that money could have been taxed at 10% or 12%. And then you might be upset with yourself for having gone pre-tax on dollars that could have been taxed at 10%, because when you're retiring and withdrawing it, that could be coming out at 22, 24%. And who knows what the tax brackets are going to be. So you do not want to be pulling money out at a higher tax rate than it is going in. Okay, so that's a very strong reason to consider backloading. Another is you just don't know what your year is going to look like. You could be in private practice and your earnings are dependent on what your business brings in. COVID, 2020, people are not earning as much this year as they earned last year. And maybe last year you made $400,000 of income, but this year, maybe you're at $300,000. And if you had front loaded as pre-tax the full $19,500 in January, then you may regret having made that decision. Okay, because you may have wanted to do that as a Roth contribution. So to me, the questions really are, should I front load? Should I back load? And then the rest of it, dollar cost averaging to me isn't really on the table, because dollar cost averaging assumes you already have the money available and you're spreading it out. If you do have the money and you're spreading it out, that means you're really leaving some money uninvested in cash. So that means your asset allocation is actually tilted more towards cash than your ideal asset allocation. Now, for us, we invest so much of our taxable money in real estate that on the months that we're not contributing to a retirement account at work, most of that money is just going into cash, and we're building up a cash reserve for our next deal because we'll invest like $200,000 at a time into a deal. So that takes months to build up. We don't just get $200,000 every month to invest. One caveat is we have our cash balance pension at my job, and that money does come out every month because of the way it is designed. Although technically it's not even your own money. That's just the employer putting the money in, and they can actually put that money in whenever they feel like it, but it does affect my paycheck every month. So they could, and what we actually did this year is we had gotten some advice from our actuary to put some money in April or May for some particular tax benefit. I don't really understand why, but I think we were trying to get some money off the books. So we had put in extra money earlier in the year than it was initially scheduled to, so that our company could take a bigger tax deduction. And then from our paychecks, it was the same every month, the amount it was affecting us, but they basically just dipped into this big gigantic pile of cash reserves to kind of front load a little bit more of the cash balance pension contribution, because the employer can do that anytime they want to do it. They can do it all the way up until March of the subsequent year. Okay. There you go. Episode number 93. Only 7 more episodes till we hit 100. Thank you very much for everybody joining. Please invite your friends. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's www.youtube.com/39.6. That's 39 POINT6 on YouTube, as you see there on the screen. These are getting broadcast there. They don't show up immediately there on YouTube, but usually by the next day they're posted. They have to like render it. But it is easier to search and find the videos on the YouTube channel than they are on in the Facebook group. And you can also, I think, even speed up the video over there. All right. Again, this is only for my entertainment, hopefully yours. This is not legal, professional, financial, accounting, any other advice. Until tomorrow, have a good